Hey guys, tonight we are going on a little stroll. Not the kind where you pop over to the local deli for a croissant or a quick iced coffee, but a 4,000-mile hike through some of the most unforgiving terrain on the planet, carrying enough gold to make a modern billionaire feel a sudden, sharp twinge of inadequacy. It is the year 1324, and you are Mansa Musa, the 10th Mansa or King of Kings of the Mali Empire. You are currently standing at the heart of your capital, Niani, and you are about to embark on a pilgrimage that is essentially a mobile, gold-plated city. Honestly, you probably wouldn't survive this journey if you had to do it today, without high-tech, moisture-wicking gear and a fleet of air-conditioned SUVs. But, since you are the wealthiest person to ever draw breath, we're going to assume your silk robes are breathable enough. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. If you're still awake and haven't drifted off to the sound of my voice just yet, go ahead and drop your location and the local time in the comments. It's always nice to know where in the world our little caravan is stopping tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are standing on a wide, shaded balcony overlooking the courtyard of your palace in Niani. The sun hasn't quite cleared the horizon yet, but the air is already thick with that heavy, humid heat that feels like a warm hug from a very large, damp relative. Below you, the world is waking up, and it is doing so with a level of intensity that would make a modern logistics manager have a complete meltdown. You aren't just packing a suitcase for a long weekend. You are packing for a year-long journey across the Sahara Desert with 60,000 of your closest friends, family members, and employees. Imagine the sound of 60,000 voices. It's not a roar, but a low, vibrating hum, like a giant beehive made of humans. There are the high-pitched calls of the animal handlers, the rhythmic clanging of blacksmiths making last-minute repairs to carriage wheels, and the soft, repetitive thud of leather pouches being filled with gold dust. It's a widely accepted historical fact that the Mali Empire was, at this time, the single largest producer of gold in the entire world. You literally have so much of it that it's less of a currency and more of a building material. You've seen it stacked in the treasury like cordwood, shimmering in the torchlight. And today, you're taking a significant chunk of it with you, just for walking around money. You watch as the servants begin to bring out the royal luggage. This isn't your standard hard-shell rolling suitcase situation. We're talking about woven baskets reinforced with cured leather, intricately carved wooden chests made of dark, heavy timber, and thousands of silk pouches. You take a sip of cool water from a clay vessel, leaning against the cool stone of the railing. You're wearing a tunic made of the finest cotton, dyed a deep, regal indigo that stains your fingers slightly if you rub the fabric too hard. Over that, you'll eventually layer robes of Persian silk, but for now, you're enjoying the relative lightness of your morning attire. The humor of the situation isn't lost on you. You're about to lead a city's worth of people across a desert where most things try to kill you. And your primary concern this morning is whether the royal chef remembered to pack your favorite spice blend for the roasted goat. It's a bit like moving house, except your house is a sprawling empire and your new neighborhood is a shifting sea of sand. You see a group of servants struggling with a particularly heavy chest. It slips, hitting the ground with a heavy thud, and a small cloud of gold dust puffs out from the seams, like golden glitter at a very expensive birthday party. Nobody panics. In Niani, gold is so common that spilling a little is like dropping a handful of salt. You just sweep it up and keep going. A quirky detail that many people forget when they think of these grand ancient processions is the sheer amount of livestock involved. Behind the columns of soldiers and the rows of officials, there is a literal walking grocery store. Thousands of sheep and goats are being corralled into the rear of the line. You can smell them from Hera musky, earthy scent that mingles with the expensive fragrance of burning frankincense and the sweet smell of frying dough from the palace kitchens. It's a sensory overload. You have an entire division of people whose only job is to make sure the goats don't eat the royal silks and that the sheep don't wander off into the Niger River. It's a full-time job, and they look like they haven't slept in 3 days. As you look out over the city, you see the mud brick architecture of Niani glowing in the pre-dawn light. The buildings are smooth, with rounded corners and wooden beams sticking out like the whiskers of a giant desert cat. It's beautiful, stable, and home. Interestingly, historians still wonder exactly where Niani was located. While we have plenty of descriptions of its grandeur, the precise archaeological site remains a subject of heated, albeit very polite, academic debate. You, however, know exactly where you are. You feel the vibration of the city beneath your feet, the pulse of an empire that stretches further than you can see. You turn back inside to find your treasurer waiting for you. He looks stressed. His job is to manage the 80 camels that have been designated specifically for carrying the gold. Each camel is being loaded with about 300 pounds of gold dust and bars. If you've ever tried to convince a single camel to do anything it didn't want to do, you can imagine the nightmare of coordinating 80 of them. They are currently in the courtyard below, groaning and occasionally trying to nibble on the ears of the passing heralds. Camels have no respect for royalty. They are the ultimate equalizers. You offer your treasurer a small, dry smile. "Did we pack the extra tent stakes?" you ask. He stares at you, blinks slowly, and nods, his eyes darting to a scroll that is roughly the length of a small rug. You realize that your packing list is actually a bureaucratic masterpiece that took 3 years to compile. You aren't just taking gold, you're taking poets, teachers, judges, and architects. You're taking a whole civilization on the road because, as the richest man in history, why would you ever settle for a lonely trip? The sun finally breaks over the horizon, hitting the gold-tipped staves of your 500 heralds who have just lined up at the palace gates. The reflection is blinding. It's like 1,000 tiny suns have suddenly ignited on the ground level. This is the signal. The stroll is about to begin. You feel a strange mix of excitement and a deep, soul-level desire to just go back to bed for another 20 minutes. But duty calls, and more importantly, the gold is already loaded. You can't exactly tell 60,000 people to unpack and try again Tuesday. You take one last look at your bedroom, the soft furs, the cool floors, the quiet. Then you turn and begin to walk down the grand staircase. Your sandals, stitched with gold thread, make a soft scuff-scuff sound on the stone. With every step, you feel the weight of the journey ahead. It's not a weight of worry, but a weight of destiny. And perhaps a little bit of the weight of that very large breakfast you just ate. You step out into the light, the heat hits your face, and the roar of the crowd rises to meet you. The journey has begun. As you descend the palace steps, the sheer scale of your own ambition begins to hit you, not as a weight, but as a shimmering, rhythmic pulse. You make your way to the very front of the procession, where the air is slightly clearer and the dust hasn't yet been kicked up by the thousands of hooves and feet behind you. This is the domain of your heralds. There are 500 of them. A number that feels perfectly reasonable when you're the wealthiest person on the planet, but would probably seem like a bit much if you were just heading to a casual brunch. These men are the face of your empire, the opening credits to your grand desert movie, and right now they are deep in the middle of their morning routine. You stop for a moment, leaning against a carved pillar, and just watch. It's a masterclass in 14th century peacocking. These heralds are all dressed in the finest Persian silk. a fabric so light and airy it seems to defy the laws of physics, rippling like the surface of a pond even when there's no breeze. You can see them adjusting the pleats of their tunics, helping each other smooth out wrinkles that only they can see. It's a bit like watching a very high-stakes fashion show, where the runway is 4,000 miles long and the judges are the entire world. You notice one herald trying to discreetly scratch his back with the end of a golden staff, his face a mask of regal concentration, while his hand does a frantic little dance. It's a reminder that even when you're draped in the wealth of a continent, an itch is still an itch. The silk they wear is a deep, vibrant crimson, dyed with secrets known only to the weavers in distant lands, and it contrasts sharply with the gold they carry. It's a widely accepted historical fact that each of these 500 heralds carried a staff made of solid gold. These aren't just thin, decorative rods, they are substantial, heavy symbols of Malian power. You walk closer and watch as one young man grips his staff, testing the weight. It's a curious detail that each of these staves weighed roughly 6 pounds. If you've ever tried to hold a 6-pound dumbbell at arm's length while walking through soft sand, you'll realize that these men aren't just heralds, they are secretly the most physically fit people in your entire entourage. They're basically doing a year-long CrossFit session, but with more prestige and significantly better outfits. The sound of the morning here is different than it was back at the palace. Here, it's the soft shush-shush of silk rubbing against silk, and the occasional metallic clink when a gold staff accidentally taps a stone. There's a faint scent of cola nuts in the air, the 14th century version of a double-shot espresso. You see several heralds chewing on them, their jaws moving in a slow, meditative rhythm. The caffeine helping to sharpen their eyes for the long day ahead. You feel a strange sense of kinship with them. They are the vanguard, the ones who have to look perfect so that you can look effortless. You watch as the head herald, a man with a beard so perfectly trimmed it looks like it was measured with a ruler, begins to align the rows. He's moving with a slow, deliberate grace, nudging a shoulder here, adjusting a staff there. It's a quiet, focused choreography. You realize that for these men, the stroll is a performance. They have to maintain this level of poise through dust storms, rain, and the blistering heat of the noon sun. You find yourself wondering if they have a secret stash of comfortable linen tunics hidden away for when the sun goes down, or if they're expected to stay this fabulous 24 hours a day. Historians still wonder if these heralds were elite soldiers, personal bodyguards, or a specialized class of courtiers whose only job was to embody the empire's splendor. In your mind, they're a bit of all three, the ultimate multitaskers in silk. A light breeze picks up, carrying the smell of the Niger River wet earth and flowering reeds. It catches the silk of the herald's sleeves, making them billow out like the wings of giant butterflies. It's an incredibly soothing sight. You take a slow, deep breath, feeling the cool air fill your lungs before the sun begins its real work of baking the world. You notice that the heralds are incredibly quiet. There's no shouting, no frantic barking of orders. Everything is handled with a series of nods and subtle hand gestures. It's the kind of quiet confidence that only comes when you know you're part of something truly historic. Or perhaps they're just all very tired and haven't had enough cola nuts yet. You move among them, a golden ghost in your own parade. You see a herald who can't be more than 19 years old, his eyes wide as he looks toward the horizon. He catches your eye and quickly ducks his head in a respectful bow, his golden staff held perfectly vertical. You give him a small, encouraging nod. You want to tell him that in a few months he'll have the strongest forearms in West Africa, but you decide to keep the royal dignity intact. Instead, you just appreciate the way the soft morning light catches the gold of his staff, turning it into a shimmering bar of pure radiance. The logistics of the morning are almost musical. The heralds begin to step into their formation, a 500-man grid of red and gold. It's like watching a giant, expensive puzzle assemble itself. You realize that this is the last moment of stillness you'll have for a long time. Once these 500 men start walking, the rest of the 60,000 will follow, and the giant machine of your pilgrimage will be in motion. It's a bit like pushing a boulder off a cliff, except the boulder is made of people, animals, and enough gold to collapse several national economies. You find a spot near the lead herald and look back at the city of Niani one last time. From this vantage point, the heralds look like a river of fire ready to flow across the land. The sarcasm you usually hold on to as a shield melts away for a moment, replaced by a genuine sense of awe. You are the man leading this. You are the one who decided that too much gold wasn't a real thing. You watch as the lead herald raises his staff, the signal for the first step. The movement is synchronized, 500 feet hitting the earth at the same time with a soft, muffled thump. It's not a military march, it's a stroll. A very, very expensive stroll. The rhythm is infectious. You find your own feet moving in time with theirs. The silk of your own robes whispers against your legs, a soft, comforting sound that reminds you of the luxury you're bringing with you into the wilderness. You're not just crossing a desert. You're extending the borders of your palace for thousands of miles. As the first row of heralds passes through the city gates, the sunlight finally hits them fully, and for a second, they seem to disappear into a cloud of golden light. It's the most beautiful, ridiculous, and peaceful thing you've ever seen. And you're just getting started, with the heralds already beginning their slow, rhythmic march toward the horizon. You turn your attention back to the courtyard, where the heavy lifting portion of this morning is taking place. If the heralds are the sleek, polished hood ornament of this operation, the camel train is the rumbling, slightly temperamental engine. You walk toward the stables, the indigo hem of your robe sweeping over the dust, and you are immediately greeted by a sound that is part groan, part rusty gate hinge, and part deep, existential sigh. This is the sound of 80 very grumpy camels realizing that their vacation in the lush pastures of Mali is officially over. You stop and observe the Gold 80, a specialized unit of dromedaries selected for their stamina, their sturdy frames, and their apparent ability to tolerate the absurdity of carrying a king's fortune across a sandbox the size of a continent. It is a widely accepted historical fact that Mansa Musa's caravan included roughly 80 to 100 camels, dedicated solely to carrying gold, with each animal bearing about 300 pounds of the precious metal. When you do the math, it's a staggering amount of wealth, but looking at them now, they don't look like symbols of an empire. They look like they've just been told they have to assemble a very large piece of IKEA furniture without the instructions. You watch a handler attempt to lead one particularly large camel toward the loading platform. The camel, a dusty beige creature with eyelashes longer than most people's career aspirations, simply plants its feet and stares at the horizon with a look of profound boredom. It's a quirky detail of camel biology that they have a third, semi-transparent eyelid that acts like a built-in pair of windshield wipers for sandstorms. Right now, that eyelid is flicking back and forth, making the camel look like it's rolling its eyes at you in slow motion. It doesn't matter that you are the wealthiest man in history. To a camel, you are just another human with a weird hat and a lot of heavy luggage. The loading process is a slow, methodical dance. You watch as two men hoist a massive leather pannier, essentially a medieval saddlebag over the hump of the animal. Inside these bags are smaller pouches made of sun-cured goatskin, each one filled to the brim with gold dust. There's something hypnotic about the way gold dust moves. Unlike solid bars, it has a fluid weight to it. It shifts and settles, finding every little gap in the bag, making it feel heavier than it looks. It's the 14th century equivalent of trying to carry a very heavy, very expensive bag of wet sand. You imagine the baggage claim at the end of this trip and realize that if these bags were at a modern airport, the overweight fees alone would probably bankrupt a small nation. The air here is thick with the scent of damp fur, old leather, and the sharp, slightly spicy smell of the dry grass the camels have been snacking on. You notice one handler trying to soothe a nervous animal by whispering to it in a low, melodic tone. It doesn't seem to be working, as the camel responds by letting out a wet, gurgling noise and attempting to nibble on the man's turban. You can't help but chuckle. There is a very specific kind of humility that comes from being the king of kings and still having to wait for a stubborn animal to finish its morning grumble before the empire can move. It's a reminder that nature doesn't care about your net worth. It only cares about how much its back hurts. The bags are secured with thick ropes made of braided baobab fiber, which is incredibly strong and slightly rough to the touch. You reach out and run a hand along one of the ropes, feeling the tension. The sheer logistics of keeping 300 pounds of gold balanced on a moving, breathing, occasionally biting animal for months on end is mind-boggling. If the weight shifts even a few inches, it can cause sores on the camel or, worse, cause the whole mess to slide off into the sand. You've hired the best loadmasters in the Sahel, men who can look at a camel and tell within an ounce if the bags are uneven. They move with a quiet, focused intensity, their fingers flighting knots that haven't changed in 1,000 years. As you stand there, a question drifts through your mind, one that historians still wonder about today. Why gold dust? Some say it was because dust was easier to measure out for small transactions along the way, while others suggest that casting it all into bars would have been too time-consuming for a caravan of this size. Or perhaps it was simply easier to hide a few handfuls of dust if things got dangerous. Though it's hard to imagine being discreet when you're traveling with 60,000 people. Regardless of the reason, the result is that you are essentially transporting a small mountain of golden sand across a large mountain of regular sand. It's poetic in a very heavy, labor-intensive kind of way. One by one, the camels are signaled to rise. This is a 3-stage process. First, the back legs kick up, sending the rider or the load lurching forward. Then, the front knees unfold with a series of alarming pops and creaks. And finally, the animal stands at its full, towering height, looking down on everyone with an air of immense superiority. You watch as the gold 80 form a line, their bells jingling softly. These aren't loud, clanging bells. They are small, bronze trinkets that make a delicate tink-tink-tink sound, a sound that will become the heartbeat of your journey for the next several hundred nights. The sun is climbing higher now, and the shadows of the camels stretch out long and thin across the courtyard floor, like spindly giants. You feel a sense of relief as the last of the gold camels is loaded and moved toward the gate. The courtyard, which was a chaotic mess of fur and shouting only an hour ago, is starting to empty out. The ground is covered in a crisscross of tracks' hoof prints, sandal prints, and the occasional drag mark from a heavy chest. It's the first page of a very long diary you're about to write with your feet. You take a moment to adjust your own robes. The indigo dye has indeed left a faint blue stain on your palms. A Tuareg kiss, as some call it, though you are a Malian king. You look at your blue-tinged hands, and then at the shimmering gold bags on the retreating camels. The contrast is beautiful, the deep, dark blue of the desert night, and the bright, blinding yellow of the sun. You realize that this journey isn't just about reaching a destination. It's about the sheer, ridiculous spectacle of the movement itself. You aren't just a king on a pilgrimage. You're a king on a journey. You are a king on a pilgrimage. 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 You are the conductor of a golden symphony, and the first movement has just begun. You follow the last camel out of the gates, stepping from the cool shade of the palace walls into the bright, open heat of the morning. The air is drier here, smelling of dust and distance. Ahead of you, the line of people and animals stretches out until it disappears into the heat haze. You find your pace a slow, steady walk that you'll have to maintain for thousands of miles. Your sandals crunch on the dry earth, a rhythmic sound that syncs up with the distant tink-tink of the camel bells. The stroll is no longer a plan, it is a reality, and as you look at the swaying humps of the gold-laden camels, you can't help but think that for a group of animals that didn't sign up for this, they sure do make being wealthy look like a lot of work. The lush, green outskirts of Niani are finally beginning to fade into the rear-view mirror of history. Or at least, they would be if you had a rear-view mirror and weren't currently walking at the brisk pace of a contemplative tortoise. You've officially entered the Sahel, that vast, transitional stretch of land that serves as the world's longest lobby before you hit the actual Sahara. It's a landscape of whispers long, golden grasses that tickle the bellies of the goats and acacia trees that look like they've been stylistically flattened by a giant, invisible hand. The air has changed, to the heavy, damp humidity of the river basin has been replaced by a dry, crisp heat that smells faintly of toasted hay and sun-baked earth. It's the kind of dry that makes you realize your skin is basically a giant sponge, and the atmosphere is currently trying to win a very slow game of squeeze the sponge. As you walk, you notice the ground beneath your sandals changing. The rich, dark loam of the capital has given way to a gritty, reddish soil that crunches with every step. It's a widely accepted historical fact that the word Sahel actually comes from the Arabic word for shore or coast, to the people of your time. The Sahara was a vast, sandy ocean, and this grassland you're currently strolling through was the beach. You find the metaphor charming, though you can't help but notice the distinct lack of a refreshing surf or a nice place to get a coconut drink. Instead of waves, you have ripples of heat. Instead of seagulls, you have the occasional, judgmental-looking vulture circling high above, wondering if anyone in your 60,000-person entourage has forgotten to hydrate. You adjust the weight of your robes, which are starting to feel a bit more like a very expensive personal sauna. You realize that your caravan is essentially a mobile ecosystem. There are children playing games with stones between the legs of moving camels. Scholars debating the finer points of Maliki law while dodging donkey carts. And a small army of cooks already thinking about where they're going to find enough firewood for tonight's millet porridge. It's a masterpiece of organized chaos. You see a man trying to fix a broken sandal strap while walking, hopping on one foot like a very dignified, silk-clad flamingo. You catch his eye, and he immediately stops hopping, attempting to look like he was simply performing a traditional dance of the single sandal people. You give him a wink and keep moving. A quirky detail that often gets lost in the grand narrative of your golden stroll is the sheer botanical importance of the baobab trees you're passing. These trees are the ancient skyscrapers of the Sahel, looking as though they were planted upside down with their roots reaching for the sky. To your people, these aren't just trees. They are living pantries and water tanks. Some of the larger, hollowed-out baobabs are used by local villagers to store grain or even as temporary shelters. You see one particularly massive tree and wonder if you could fit your entire treasury inside it. Probably not, but it's a fun thought to pass the time between mile 12 and mile 13. You notice a group of your travelers stopping to gather the monkey bread fruit from the branches of tart. Powdery treat that's essentially the 14th century version of a vitamin C supplement. It keeps the scurvy away and gives you something to chew on while you contemplate the infinite horizon. The pace of the caravan is dictated by the slowest member, which, unfortunately for the ambitious young heralds at the front, is usually a very stubborn goat or an elderly scholar who has found a particularly interesting rock to examine. You don't mind the slowness, though, in a world that usually demands you be the king every second of the day. There is something profoundly peaceful about being just one moving part in a giant, golden machine. The silence of the Sahel is different from the silence of the palace. It's a busy silence, the sound of wind through dry grass, the rhythmic thud-thud of thousands of feet, and the distant, melodic whistling of the herdsman. It's like a white noise machine, designed by a desert deity, specifically to help you drift off. As the sun climbs to its midday peak, the colors of the landscape begin to wash out into a pale, shimmering gold. It's hard to tell where the grass ends and the sky begins. This brings up a point of much discussion back in the future. Historians still wonder if your caravan followed a strictly northern route through the heart of the Sahel, or if you hugged the more southern, water-rich paths near the bend of the Niger River. Some argue that a 60,000-person crowd would have needed the river's constant presence, while others believe your logistical planning was so superior that you could strike out across the drier scrubland without breaking a sweat. You just smile to yourself, knowing that the secret died with your map sand. Honestly, half the time, you were just following the lead camel, who seemed to have a very good internal compass for the next well. You see a group of soldiers practicing their formation in the dirt, their spears catching the light. They look a bit bored, which is generally a good sign for a king. Bored soldiers mean no one is trying to invade, and the only battle today is against a particularly persistent horsefly. You notice one soldier using his polished shield to reflect light onto a friend's back. A 14th century version of a laser pointer prank. It's reassuring to know that even in the midst of the most famous pilgrimage in history, people are still finding ways to be slightly annoying to their friends. It makes the whole God-King thing feel a bit more human. The heat starts to play tricks on your eyes. In the distance, you see what looks like a shimmering lake, but you know it's just the spirit of the sun dancing on the salt flats. It's a reminder that the Sahel is a place of illusions, a training ground for the even more deceptive Sahara that lies ahead. You take a long pull from your leather waterskin. The water is warm and tastes faintly of the goatskin it was stored in, which isn't exactly a 5-star dining experience, but it's wet, and right now, that's all that matters. You pour a little bit into your palm and wipe it across the back of your neck, feeling the instant, fleeting chill as the dry air whisks the moisture away. As the afternoon shadows begin to stretch out, turning the acacia trees into long, spindly giants, you feel a sense of accomplishment. You haven't reached the great cities yet, and you haven't even hit the sand dunes. But you've successfully transitioned your world from the familiar to the frontier. The shore of the Sahel is behind you, and the deep ocean is calling. You look back at the line of people stretching as far as the eye can see, a golden thread sewing the earth together. You feel the rhythm of the stroll in your bones, now a steady, unhurried beat that promises to carry you across the world and back again, provided the camels don't go on strike first. The evening air brings a subtle shift, a coolness that feels like a reward for surviving the day's heat. You see the first campfires being prepped in the distance, tiny sparks that look like fallen stars against the darkening ground. The Sahel is tucking itself in, and you are ready to do the same. You find yourself looking forward to the simple luxury of sitting on a woven mat, eating a bowl of spicy stew, and listening to the poets tell stories of your ancestors until your eyes grow too heavy to stay open. The golden stroll continues, one dusty step at a time, into the deepening blue of the desert twilight. It is Friday, and in your world, Friday isn't just the day you start eyeing the exit, and thinking about your weekend plans. For a 14th century Malian king on a pilgrimage, Friday is the spiritual anchor of the week, a day of mandatory rest, reflection. And if you happen to be the richest man in history, a bit of casual civil engineering. You've been walking for 6 days, your sandals now well acquainted with the grit of the Sahel, and the rhythm of the caravan has become a second heartbeat. But today, the rhythm changes. The morning doesn't start with the usual frantic loading of camels and the shouting of heralds. Instead, there is a purposeful, almost cinematic stillness. You are about to engage in what might be the most extravagant pop-up tradition in human history. It is a widely accepted historical fact that Mansa Musa, during his legendary Tug, ordered the construction of a mosque every single Friday at whatever location the caravan happened to be resting. Think about that for a second. While most people are happy if they remember to pack an extra pair of socks for a trip, you are packing an entire architectural department. You aren't just traveling, you are trail of infrastructure behind you traveling. You stand in the center of the camp, watching as your master builders and a small army of laborers begin to transform a patch of dusty earth into a house of worship. It's a bit like watching a high-speed time-lapse video, but in real life, and with significantly more mud. The pop-up mosque isn't some flimsy tent or a temporary wooden stage. This is Malian architecture we're talking about, the Sudano-Sahelian style that uses the very earth beneath your feet to create something magnificent. You watch as men haul buckets of water from a nearby well, mixing it with the red clay and straw to create a thick, malleable mortar. It smells of wet earth and ancient recipes. You see the toran, the wooden beams that stick out from the walls like the bristles of a hedgehog being slotted into place. They serve as permanent scaffolding for future repairs. But right now, they just look like a very bold design choice. You find a certain dry humor in the fact that your rest day involves the construction of a building that would take a modern suburban neighborhood 3 years to approve through a zoning committee. You do it in a few hours. A quirky detail that often baffles people who aren't used to desert logistics is the mosque readiness of your caravan. You actually travel with a specialized crew whose entire job description is Friday architecture. They don't load gold. They don't herd goats, and they definitely don't walk the camels. They wait for Friday. For 6 days a week, they are the most relaxed people in Africa. But on the 7th day, they move with a frantic, coordinated grace that is honestly a little intimidating to watch. They are the 14th century equivalent of a Formula One pit crew, but instead of changing tires, they are raising minarets. You notice one builder balancing on a wooden beam, smoothing the mud with a flat trowel while singing a low, rhythmic song. He looks like he's having the time of his life, or perhaps he's just happy he doesn't have to carry a gold staff today. The air begins to fill with the scent of burning agar wood and frankincense as the sun reaches its zenith. The mosque is nearly finished, a smooth, sun-baked structure that looks like it grew out of the ground itself. It's not finished in the polished marble and stained glass sense, but it is beautiful in its organic, rounded simplicity. It feels cool to the touch, a thermal miracle of mud and shadow. You retreat to your own tent to prepare, washing your hands, face, and feet with cool water. You change into a fresh robe of white silk, a color that symbolizes purity and, more practically, doesn't absorb the heat of the midday sun like your usual indigo. You look in a polished bronze mirror and realize you have a caravan tan, a very specific line where your royal headwear ends and your sun-kissed forehead begins. Even a king of kings isn't immune to a bit of uneven pigmentation. As the mueddin stands to give the call to prayer, a profound silence falls over the 60,000 people. It's a sound that travels for miles across the flat, open landscape, long, melodic cry that seems to hang in the shimmering heat. You walk toward the newly built mosque, your bare feet enjoying the damp, cool mud of the fresh floor. Behind you, thousands of people find their spots on the sand, laying out woven prayer mats in long, neat rows that stretch toward the horizon. It's a moment of immense, quiet power. For all the gold and all the heralds, this is why you are here. Interestingly, historians still wonder if these Friday mosques were meant to be permanent gifts to the local communities, or if they were simpler, symbolic structures that were eventually reclaimed by the desert winds. Some scholars argue that you left behind a golden road of permanent mud brick mosques that served as the seeds for future towns, while others think they were more like elaborate, sanctified campsites. You look at the walls around you, solid and damp, and you suspect the answer is a bit of both. You're leaving a footprint, but in the Sahel, even the strongest footprint eventually softens into a memory. During the sermon, you find your mind wandering just a little, not out of boredom, but out of a sense of overwhelming peace. The interior of the mosque is dim and smells of fresh earth and the spicy, floral perfume of the nobles sitting near you. You hear the soft flick-flick of a fan somewhere behind you, and the occasional distant bleat of a goat who clearly didn't get the memo about the Friday silence. It's a lightly amusing contrast, the height of religious solemnity being gently interrupted by a hungry farm animal. You suspect that even the divine has a sense of humor about goats. After the prayers, the mosque becomes a community hub. Local villagers, who have been watching this golden city on the move with wide eyes, are invited to share in the feast. You watch as massive platters of seasoned rice, grilled meat, and honey-soaked cakes are brought out. This is the diplomatic part of the Friday ritual. You aren't just praying, you're showing the world that Molian wealth is as generous as it is vast. You see a small child from a nearby village being handed a piece of fruit by one of your high-ranking generals, and for a moment the hierarchy of the empire disappears. It's just people sharing a meal in the shade of a building that didn't exist when they woke up this morning. As the sun begins to dip, casting long, purple shadows across the new mosque, you feel a deep sense of satisfaction. The structure is already beginning to dry and harden in the desert heat, turning a pale, sandy gold. Tomorrow, you will lead the caravan away, leaving this building behind like a discarded shell. It feels wasteful, in a way, but also beautifully poetic. You are a king who builds and moves, a man who understands that the journey is the destination, and that sometimes you need to build a house just to prove you can leave it. You walk back to your tent as the first stars begin to poke through the deepening blue of the sky. The Friday feeling has settled over the camper, relaxed, sleepy vibe that makes even the camels seem a little less irritable. You lay down on your bed of soft furs, listening to the quiet chatter of the camp and the distant, rhythmic drumming of a celebration in the village. Your pop-up mosque is a dark silhouette against the stars, a temporary monument to a permanent faith. You close your eyes, the scent of the cool mud still lingering in your nose, and you realize that if you have to build a city every week just to get a good night's sleep, then so be it. The Sahel is now a memory of grass and acacia, and you have officially entered the great sand sea, the Sahara. As the sun dips below the horizon, it doesn't just get dark. It feels as though the universe has pulled a heavy, velvet curtain over the world. The transition is startling. During the day, the desert is a relentless, golden furnace that makes you question every life choice that led you away from your shaded palace. But at night, the Sahara transforms into something cool, blue, and impossibly vast. You are sitting outside your royal tent, wrapped in a heavy cloak of dark wool that smells faintly of cedar and wood smoke. The heat of the day is being sucked out of the sand and into the atmosphere, a thermal exchange that leaves the ground feeling like a cool, dry bed. It is a widely accepted historical fact that the Sahara experiences some of the most extreme temperature fluctuations on Earth, sometimes dropping from 100 degrees Fahrenheit during the day to near freezing at night. You find this deeply ironic. You are the man who owns the sun's favorite empire, yet here you are, shivering slightly and wondering if it would be unkingly to ask for a third blanket. You look around at the camp, which has sprawled out across the dunes like a gargantuan, glowing organism. With 60,000 people, the camp doesn't just have a few fires. It has thousands. From your vantage point on a slight rise, it looks as though the stars have fallen from the sky and decided to huddle together on the sand for warmth. The sound of the camp at night is what strikes you most. It's a starlit silence that isn't actually silent at all. It is the rhythmic, collective breathing of an entire city on the move. If you listen closely, you can hear the soft crackle-pop of dying embers, the distant, muffled laughter of a group of soldiers sharing a final joke, and the low, guttural snore of a camel that sounds suspiciously like a rusty chainsaw. It's a strangely comforting white noise. You realize that you are never truly alone, even in the middle of a literal wasteland. You are the heartbeat of this massive, sleeping beast. You find yourself wondering if the people on the edges of the camp can hear you snoring, too, or if royal snores are considered a form of sacred music. A quirky detail about life in the deep desert is the phenomenon of the singing sands. As you sit there, the wind shifts, and you hear a low, humming drone that seems to vibrate through the soles of your feet. It's not a ghost or a distant army. It's the sound of billions of sand grains sliding over one another as a dune shifts in the night air. It sounds like a giant, sandy cello being played by a very sleepy giant. It's beautiful and a little bit eerie, the kind of sound that makes you want to pull your cloak a little tighter. To your people, these are the voices of the desert spirits. But to you, tonight, it just sounds like the world's largest ambient sleep track. You consider hiring a poet to write a verse about it, but you're honestly too tired to find a pen. The stars above you are so bright they almost feel aggressive. Without any city lights or humidity to block them, the constellations look like they've been polished with a silk cloth. You can see the Milky Way clearly, a thick, frosted smear across the center of the sky that your guides call the path of the straw. They use these stars to navigate the trackless dunes with the precision of a modern GPS, though their satellites are just burning balls of gas billions of miles away. You find a certain dry humor in the fact that your entire destiny and the safety of your 60,000 followers currently depends on a few points of light and a guy named Ibrahim who claims he can smell where the next well is. So far, Ibrahim hasn't let you down, but you still keep a very close eye on the North Star just in case. Interestingly, historians still wonder exactly how you managed the logistics of water for such a massive crowd in the heart of the Sahara. Even with a well-planned route, 60,000 people and thousands of animals require a literal river of water every single day. Some suggest you moved in smaller, staggered waves that met at oases, while others believe you discovered hidden aquifers that have since dried up and vanished into legend. You look at the waterskin resting by your side. It's made of treated goat leather and is remarkably cool thanks to the evaporation through the pores. You take a sip, and it tastes of copper and survival. You don't know the science of the aquifers. You just know that every time you've been thirsty, the desert has eventually provided. It's a bit like a very high-stakes scavenger hunt, where the prize is not dying of thirst. You watch a small beetle scuttle across the sand near your foot. It's a desert specialist, moving with a jerky, determined energy. You feel a weird sense of respect for it. This beetle doesn't have 500 heralds or 80 camels loaded with gold. It just has 6 legs and a dream of finding a damp piece of moss. You realize that, in the eyes of the Sahara, you and the beetle are basically the same thing. Temporary visitors trying not to get buried. It's a humbling thought, the kind that only comes to you at 2 a.m. when the air is cold and the world feels infinite. You decide that if you ever make it back to Molly, you'll be much nicer to beetles. The silence deepens as the last of the fires flicker out, leaving only the blue-white glow of the moon to illuminate the camp. The white tents of the nobles look like a cluster of ghost flowers blooming in the dark. You feel the tension of the Datha, worries about the gold, the diplomacy of the next city, the heat of the sun, all of it just evaporates into the cold night air. Your breathing begins to slow, syncing up with the rhythmic shush of the wind against the tent fabric. It's a deep, soul-level relaxation that you can only find when you're hundreds of miles away from the nearest important meeting. You stand up, your knees giving a small, sympathetic creak, and turn toward the entrance of your tent. Inside, the floor is covered in layers of thick, plush carpets from the Maghrib, and your bed is a nest of silk and fur that looks more inviting than a pool of cool water. You take one last look at the stars, feeling small but incredibly significant. You are Mansa Musa, and you have turned the world's most dangerous desert into your personal bedroom. As you crawl into the furs, the cold air stays outside, and the warmth of the tent envelops you. The last thing you hear before drifting off is the distant, rhythmic thump of a guard's spear, but hitting the sand as he shifts his wetter heartbeat for the city that never stops moving, even when it's dreaming. The shifting, golden dunes of the deep Sahara have finally given way to something even more surreal. As you crest a final rocky ridge, the world stops being yellow and orange and suddenly turns a blinding, crystalline white. For a moment, you might think you've accidentally marched your 60,000 followers into a frozen wasteland. But the heat hitting your face quickly corrects that notion. This is Tagaza, a place that looks like a winter wonderland but feels like a pizza oven. You are standing on the edge of a village that shouldn't exist, a town built entirely, and quite literally, out of salt. It's the kind of place that makes you realize your Malian mud-brick palaces are actually quite sensible by comparison. You walk down the main thoroughfare, and the sound beneath your sandals isn't the soft shush of sand or the thud of earth, but a sharp, metallic crunch. It's like walking on a giant pile of broken glass or very stiff cornflakes. Everything here is made of salt. The walls of the houses are carved from heavy, translucent blocks of rock salt. The roofs are thatched with camel hides over salt slab rafters, and even the local mosque is a crystalline monument to sodium chloride. It is a widely accepted historical fact that Tagaza was the primary source of rock salt for the trans-Saharan trade, a place so desolate and mineral-rich that it became a vital lung in the body of the medieval world's economy. To the people of the Mediterranean, salt was a seasoning. To the people of West Africa, it was a necessity for survival, often traded ounce for ounce, with the very gold you have currently loaded onto your camels. You reach out and touch the wall of a nearby house. It's cool, rough, and strangely dry. You find yourself fighting the very unkingly urge to give the wall a quick lick, just to see if it really is as salty as it looks. You decide against it mostly because 500 heralds are watching you, and you have a reputation to maintain. But also because you're pretty sure the owner of the house wouldn't appreciate you seasoning yourself on their living room. You notice that the blocks are held together not with mortar, but with a thin slurry of, you guessed it, more salt and a tiny bit of brackish water. It's a quirky detail of Tagaza's architecture that the town is essentially one giant, edible puzzle. It only survives because it almost never rains here. If a heavy thunderstorm ever rolled through, the entire village would simply dissolve into a very large, very seasoned puddle. You imagine the local weather report. Clear skies with a 0% chance of rain, or else we all lose our bedrooms. The air in Gaza has a sharp, mineral temps to it that makes your nose tingle. It's a clean smell, but one that leaves a faint, crusty residue on your lips after an hour of walking. You see your caravan members looking around with a mix of awe and mild discomfort. Your soldiers, usually so stoic, are squinting against the glare of the white ground, which reflects the sun like 1,000 broken mirrors. You notice a group of your servants trying to negotiate for a few slabs of the high-quality purple salt, which is considered a luxury. The local miners, who live here year-round, look like they've been carved from the earth themselves. Their skin is toughened by the brine and the sun, and they look at your silk-clad entourage with a sort of weary, salt-crusted amusement. To them, you are just another golden customer passing through a town that is, quite literally, worth its weight in their own backyard. A light breeze kicks up, and instead of dust, a fine, sparkling powder of salt crystals swirls through the air. It's beautiful in a way that's slightly irritating to the eyes. You find a bit of dry humor in the irony of the situation. You are the richest man in the world, carrying enough gold to buy a dozen kingdoms. Yet, in this town, you'd probably trade a handful of gold dust for a single gallon of truly fresh, sweet water. Interestingly, historians still wonder exactly how the inhabitants of Gaza managed to survive for long periods without a local source of fresh water or arable land. Every scrap of food, every drop of drinkable water, and even the wood for the fires had to be brought in by caravans like yours. Some scholars debate whether the town was a permanent settlement or a rotating labor camp where people only stayed as long as their kidneys could take the salt-saturated environment. You look at the local wealth. The water is so salty even the camels look at it with suspicion, and you decide that the people here must be made of much sturdier stuff than your palace courtiers. You are invited to rest in the governor's house, a structure that is slightly larger than the others but made of the same glittering white slabs. Inside, the light is filtered through the salt walls, creating a soft, ethereal glow that reminds you of the inside of a cloud. It's remarkably quiet. Salt is an incredible sound insulator, and the chaotic hum of your 60,000 followers is reduced to a distant, muffled vibration. You sit on a thick rug, and for the first time in weeks, the air feels truly cool. The salt acts as a natural heat sink, pulling the midday furnace breath out of the room. You're served a meal of dried meat and dates, which, unsurprisingly, does not need any extra seasoning. You find yourself wondering if the people here have a secret pepper town somewhere else in the desert just to balance things out. As you eat, you notice that your indigo robes have left a blue stain on the white salt bench you're sitting on. It's a striking image, a smudge of deep, royal blue on a canvas of pure, crystalline white. You realize that your presence here is a temporary disruption of a very old, very quiet cycle. You are the gold coming from the south, and Gaza is the salt going from the north. You are the two ends of the world meeting in a white-walled room. It's a moment of profound economic symmetry, even if your mouth is currently a little too dry to fully appreciate the poetry of it. As evening approaches, the white town begins to change colors. The setting sun turns the salt houses a deep, glowing orange, then a fiery pink, and finally a ghostly, pale violet. It's a light show that no mud-brick city could ever hope to replicate. You walk back to your own camp, which has been set up on the outskirts of the salt flats. The contrast between your dark, woolen tents and the glowing white town is stunning. You feel the grit of the salt in your hair and on your skin, a physical reminder that you are passing through a place that is fundamentally different from anywhere else on Earth. You lay down on your bed, listening to the crunching of the guard's footsteps on the salt crust outside. It's a rhythmic, crystalline lullaby. You find yourself thinking about the sheer absurdity of it all: a city of salt, a king of gold, and a desert that seems to enjoy making both feel very small. Your eyes grow heavy as you watch the moonlight sparkle off the salt walls of Tagaza in the distance. It looks like a city made of fallen stars, cold and beautiful. You drift off to sleep, your dreams filled with white landscapes and the distant, tinkling sound of salt crystals dancing in the wind, a quiet reminder that even in the harshest desolation, there is a strange, shimmering kind of peace. The crystalline white of Tagaza is now a shimmering ghost in your memory as you plunge back into the true heart of the Saharan dunes. Today, the horizon has decided to be particularly unhelpful, blurring into a hazy line where the pale blue of the sky meets the undulating, tawny sand. There are no landmarks, here no trees, no rocky outcrops, and certainly no street signs. You are moving through a world that is essentially a giant, slow-motion ocean of grit. You find yourself walking near the head of the caravan, not out of a desire to lead, but because you are fascinated by the desert navigators. These are the men who hold your life, and the lives of your 60,000 companions, in the palms of their calloused hands. They don't use maps. They read the desert like a familiar, ever-changing book. It is a widely accepted historical fact that medieval trans-Saharan travel relied heavily on specialized guides, often from the Tuareg or Berabic tribes, who possessed an uncanny ability to navigate by the stars, the sun, and the very texture of the sand. You watch the lead navigator, a man named Bakari, who has a face that looks like a topographical map of the very dunes he's crossing. Every few miles, he stops, kneels, and picks up a handful of sand. He doesn't just look at it, he smells it and lets it trickle through his fingers, watching how the wind catches the different-sized grains. He's looking for the signature of the land, the specific mineral mix that tells him he's still on the invisible path toward the next well. It's a level of expertise that makes your royal education in philosophy and law feel suddenly very abstract and slightly useless. A quirky detail of this slow navigation is the use of the shadow stick during the day. You watch Bakari plant a simple wooden staff into a flat patch of sand during a brief rest. He marks the end of the shadow, waits a few minutes, and marks it again. By observing the curve of the shadow's movement, he can determine true north with more accuracy than you can determine the time of day by looking at your own grumbling stomach. You find a certain dry humor in the fact that your multi-million-ounce gold shipment is being guided by a twig and a man who talks to the wind. You imagine what your court officials back in Niani would think. They love their scrolls and their inkiet here. The only scroll that matters is the one written in the ripples of the dunes. The air today is still and heavy, smelling of heat and the dry, metallic scent of ancient dust. The silence is so absolute that you can hear the soft patter-patter of your own heart. You realize that navigating the Sahara isn't just about direction. It's about timing. Move too fast and you exhaust the water. Move too slow and the desert eats you. It's a delicate, high-stakes dance. You notice that the caravan doesn't move in a straight line. It snakes and curves, following the valleys between the massive dunes to save the animals' energy. Every step is calculated. You see a young herald trying to take a shortcut over the crest of a steep dune. He makes it halfway up before the sand gives way, sending him sliding back down in a very ungraceful, silk-covered heap. Bakari doesn't even look back. He just keeps his steady, rhythmic pace. The desert, you realize, has a very low tolerance for innovative shortcuts. As you walk, a question comes to mind that historians still wonder about. How did these navigators account for the shifting nature of the desert? The Sahara of 1324 was not the Sahara of today. and dunes that were 100 feet tall one year could be flattened or moved half a mile by the next season's storms. Some scholars believe the guides used intergenerational memory, passing down descriptions of underground rock formations that influenced how the sand settled, while others think they navigated primarily by the feel of the prevailing winds against their skin. You watch Bakari's ears. They are always tilted slightly, as if he's listening to a conversation the wind is having with the dunes. You suspect he isn't just following a path. He's feeling the breath of the earth itself. The sun begins its slow descent, and the navigation shifts from the earth to the heavens. This is your favorite part of the day. As the sky turns a bruised purple, the stars begin to pop out like silver needle points. Bakari points toward a specific cluster, the Seven Sisters or Pleiades, and adjusts the line of the caravan. You find it incredibly soothing to know that your entire world is being steered by something so far away and so permanent. In the palace, people are always moving the furniture or changing the laws, but the stars are reliable. They are the 14th century's only true fixed points. You find yourself matching your stride to the rhythm of the camel bells again, a tink-tink that seems to harmonize with the twinkling of the Milky Way. You notice that the navigators are incredibly protective of their knowledge. They speak in a sort of shorthand, using gestures and low whistles to communicate changes in direction. It's a secret society of the sands. You, as the king, are the precious cargo, but for the first time in your life, you aren't the one in charge. If Bakari decided to turn left instead of right, you'd follow him without question. It's a liberating feeling. In a way, the weight of the empire is still there, but the weight of which way is north is entirely on someone else's shoulders. You decide that when you return, you will give Bakari enough gold to retire to a garden that never sees a grain of sand again, though you suspect he'd probably just miss the smell of the dunes. The cool night air begins to settle, and the sand beneath your feet loses its biting heat, turning into a soft, velvety carpet. The navigators finally signal for the halt. They don't use a horn or a shout. They simply stop walking and plant their staves. Like a giant slow-motion wave, the message ripples back through the miles of people. The stroll pauses for the night. You watch as Bakari takes one last look at the stars, nods to himself, and sits down right where he stands. He looks perfectly at peace. You walk over to your tent, which is being erected with practiced efficiency by your servants. You look back at the path you've traveled, but there are no footprints. The wind has already begun to smooth them over. It's as if you were never there. The Sahara doesn't keep records, and it doesn't take names. It only keeps the secrets of those who know how to listen. You lay down on your bed, feeling the gentle, rhythmic swaying of the day's walk still vibrating in your legs. You close your eyes, trusting in the stars and the shadow sticks, and the man who smells the sand. The desert is vast, and the journey is long, but tonight you are exactly where you are supposed to be. The relentless, monochromatic horizon of the deep Sahara has finally cracked, revealing a sight that feels less like geography and more like a hallucination. After weeks of seeing nothing but varying shades of burnt toast and shimmering heat, the world has suddenly exploded into a vibrant, defiant green. You have reached an oasis, a hidden pocket of life, tucked into a fold of the desert like a secret letter. As you lead the caravan down a gentle slope, the air changes instantly. The dry, rasping wind that usually tastes of dust and sun-baked minerals is replaced by a soft, humid breeze that carries the scent of damp earth, ripening dates, and flowering jasmine. It's like stepping out of a furnace and into a cool, botanical lung. You find a shady spot beneath a cluster of swaying date palms. These trees are the undisputed kings of the oasis, their long, feathered fronds interlocking to create a natural green cathedral. It is a widely accepted historical fact that oases were the lifeblood of the trans-Saharan trade routes, functioning as essential gas stations where travelers could refuel on water and food. But calling this an essential stop feels like calling your golden palace a nice place to sit. To your 60,000 followers, this is paradise. You watch as the soldiers drop their heavy shields and the heralds lean their golden staves against the rough, diamond-patterned bark of the palms. The tension in the camp doesn't just dissipate. It dissolves like a salt block in the Niger River. You sit down on a woven mat spread over the cool grass actual. Honest-to-goodness green grass, and lean your back against a tree trunk. Above you, clusters of dates hang like heavy amber jewelry, ripening in the dappled sunlight. A quirky detail about oasis life is the multi-story farming system. You look down and see that beneath the tall palms, there are smaller fruit trees, pomegranates and figs, and beneath those, a carpet of vegetables and herbs, like mint and onions. It's a masterpiece of space management, a three-dimensional garden where every inch of shade is utilized. You notice a small irrigation channel, a fougera, trickling nearby. The water is crystal clear and moves with a soft, musical glug-glug that is more soothing than the finest court harpist. You watch a tiny frog sit on the edge of the channel, staring at you with an expression of immense, amphibious self-importance. In Niani, you are the king of kings, but here you are just a large, brightly dressed intruder in the frog's private pool. The humor of the scene isn't lost on you as you watch your personal servants begin the delicate task of unpacking your portable throne. It's a magnificent piece of ebony, inlaid with ivory. But seeing them struggle to level it on a patch of moss while a goat tries to eat the velvet cushion is a humbling spectacle. You decide to stay on the grass. Sometimes, even a king of kings just wants to feel the dirt. You see your high-ranking officials arguing over which palm tree provides the most regal shade, a debate that involves a lot of pointing, squinting at the sun, and very serious-looking hand gestures. It reminds you that humans will find a way to make anything competitive, even relaxing. You give them a dry smile and continue peeling an orange, the zest spraying a tiny, fragrant mist into the air. As you sip a cup of mint tea, a question drifts through your mind that historians still wonder about. How did these oases stay so incredibly lush for centuries without being swallowed by the surrounding dunes? Some believe the ancient inhabitants possessed a secret knowledge of wind shaping, planting specific trees to deflect the encroaching sands, while others credit the sophisticated underground aqueducts that stretched for miles beneath the desert floor. You look at the water trickling through the fougera and realize it's a miracle of engineering and patience. It's a reminder that while your empire is built on gold, the world is actually run on water and the quiet work of people who know how to find it. The sound of the oasis at midday is a symphony of rest. You hear the rhythmic thump-thump of women in the distance, pounding grain. The soft, repetitive cooing of mourning doves in the high branches, and the occasional splash of a child jumping into a cooling pool. The heat of the Sahara is still there, just beyond the wall of palms, but here it is filtered and tamed. You feel your muscles finally You've spent weeks worrying about the gold 80 camels and the pace of the heralds, but under the palms, time seems to stretch and loop. You realize that you aren't just resting your body, you're resting your soul. The stroll has a new rhythm, now a slow, swaying heartbeat that matches the movement of the palm fronds above. You notice a group of local oasis dwellers watching your caravan with a mixture of awe and practiced hospitality. They bring out trays of fresh bread and bowls of goat milk, and you ensure they are paid in gold dust that probably represents a decade's worth of local commerce. One of your poets begins to recite a verse about the green eye of the desert, his voice low and melodic, blending perfectly with the rustle of the leaves. You find yourself nodding off, your chin dipping toward your chest. The indigo stain on your fingers is starting to fade, replaced by the green smudge of crushed grass. It's a good trade. The light in the oasis is different from the harsh glare of the dunes. It's a soft, emerald-tinted light that makes everyone look younger and more peaceful. You see a camel, one of the grumpy gold-bearers, standing knee-deep in a patch of clover, looking uncharacteristically smug. Even the animals know they've won the geographical lottery today. You close your eyes, the scent of damp earth filling your lungs, and you feel a profound sense of gratitude. The desert is a hard teacher, but it provides the most beautiful classrooms. As the afternoon shadows grow long and the air begins to cool even further, you prepare for the evening feast. But for now, you just stay still. You listen to the water, the birds, and the soft breathing of your empire as it naps in the shade. You are Mansa Musa, and you have found a kingdom of green in a world of gold. It's a quiet, shimmering moment of perfection, a brief pause in a journey that is quickly becoming a legend. You realize that sometimes the most important part of a long stroll is the moment you decide to stop and just be a part of the garden. The emerald canopy of the oasis is now behind you, and the horizon has begun to shift from the desolate, shifting sands of the deep desert to the rugged, sun-baked hills of eastern Egypt. You can feel a change in the air. It no longer carries the lonely scent of the empty dunes, but rather a complex, spicy bouquet of wood smoke, roasting meat, and the distant, muddy promise of the Nile. You are approaching Cairo, the intellectual and commercial heart of the Mamluk Sultanate, and for the first time in months, your 60,000-person city anthem move is about to encounter a city that actually stays in one place. You find yourself standing at a vantage point as the morning sun begins to burn through the haze, and suddenly, there it is, Cairo, glowing in a golden morning light that makes your own gold-laden camels look almost understated. It is a widely accepted historical fact that Mansa Musa's arrival in Cairo in XL 1324 was one of the most significant diplomatic and economic events of the 14th century. To the people of Cairo, your caravan wasn't just a pilgrimage. It was a cosmic anomaly, a river of wealth flowing out of the land of the blacks that defied every existing map and ledger. You watch as the outskirts of the city begin to swarm with curious onlookers. People are lining the rooftops, their colorful robes flapping like prayer flags in the breeze. You notice the architecture shifting from the organic, rounded mud bricks of Mali to the sharp, geometric precision of limestone and marble. The citadel of Saladin looms over the city like a stone giant, its minarets piercing the sky like needles. You feel a strange mix of pride and a very specific type of traveler's anxiety, the kind you get when you realize you're about to be the center of attention in a very crowded room. You adjust your royal turban, which has gathered a fine layer of Saharan dust, and find a certain dry humor in the frantic preparations of your advisors. They are currently obsessed with the protocol of your meeting with the Sultan of Egypt, Al-Nasir Muhammad. There is a heated debate happening near your litter regarding whether you should kiss the ground before the Sultan. Your advisors are horrified by the suggestion. After all, you are a Mansa, a king of kings, but the Egyptian officials are very fond of their traditional ground-kissing ceremonies. You decide to let them argue. You're more interested in the way the morning light catches the white domes of the city, turning them into a field of giant, glowing pearls. You suspect that accidentally forgetting to bow to low is a diplomatic maneuver you can pull off with enough charm and a few extra bags of gold. A quirky detail of your entrance into Cairo is the sheer volume of impulse buying happening among your followers. Your soldiers and servants haven't seen a real market in months. and they are currently descending upon the Egyptian merchants with a level of enthusiasm that is both heartwarming and economically terrifying. You see a herald trading a small pouch of gold dust for a silk scarf that is definitely not worth its weight in gold. But he looks so happy with his new accessory that you can't bring yourself to mind. The merchants of Cairo, known for being some of the savviest traders on earth, look like they've just won the lottery. Their eyes are wide, their scales are working overtime, and they are greeting your caravan with a level of hospitality that is suspiciously enthusiastic. It's the 14th century equivalent of a luxury cruise ship docking at a small island. Everyone is about to get very rich, or at least very well fed. The air in Cairo is thick and sensory. It smells of attarine, the spice market where cloves, cinnamon, and pepper create a fragrant cloud that makes you sneeze in a very dignified, royal way. You hear the rhythmic clanging of the coppersmiths, the shouting of water carriers, and the melodic, high-pitched calls of the pigeon sellers. It's a chaotic symphony compared to the starlit silence of the Sahara. Interestingly, historians still wonder exactly where your massive 60,000-person entourage actually slept during this visit. Some suggest you camped at the foot of the pyramids of Giza, turning the ancient tombs into the world's most impressive backdrop for a tent city, while others believe the Sultan cleared out entire districts of the city to accommodate your golden stroll. You look toward the horizon and see the tips of the pyramids peeking over the hills. They look like weathered stone echoes of the dunes you just left behind. You are led through the Bob Zuwilla Gate, and the sheer verticality of the city starts to make you feel a little dizzy. In Mali, the world is horizontal and vast. Here, it is stacked and cramped. The sleep history hour has truly reached its crescendo. You notice that even your gold 80 camels look a bit overwhelmed by the noise, their long necks swaying as they try to avoid bumping into the ornate wooden balconies that jut out over the streets. You find yourself smiling at a group of Egyptian children who are trying to count your gold bearers. They give up around 40 and just start cheering instead. You realize that to these people, you aren't just a king. You are a living myth. A man who has walked through the fire of the desert and come out the other side, dripping in sun. The temperature is rising, but the narrow streets provide long, cool ribbons of shadow. You take a slow sip of sherbet, chilled fruit drink, flavored with rosewater, offered to you by a palace official. It's sweet, icy, and makes your teeth ache in the most delightful way. You feel the dust of the last 1,000 miles finally being washed away by the luxury of a settled civilization. You are Mansa Musa, and you have brought the heart of Africa to the gates of the East. The stroll has become a parade, and the parade is about to become a legend. As you approach the Sultan's palace, the music of the city reaches a peak. Drums, flutes, and the rhythmic chanting of the crowd. You take a deep, grounding breath. You've survived the thirst, the salt, and the shifting sands. Now, you just have to survive a very polite conversation with another king. You look down at your hands. The indigo stain is almost gone, replaced by the clean, pale look of a man who has finally come inside from the sun. You feel a sense of profound, quiet achievement. You didn't just cross the desert. You brought the desert to its knees, and you did it all without breaking your stride. You step off your litter and onto the polished marble of the palace courtyard. The cool stone feels strange and wonderful beneath your feet. You look back one last time at the gates, where the dust of your caravan is still settling in the golden Egyptian sun. Tomorrow, you will talk politics and currency, but tonight, you are going to sleep in a room that doesn't move, listening to the soft, rhythmic hum of a city that has been waiting centuries for your arrival. The stroll continues, but for now, the path is made of silk and stone. The cool, polished marble of the Sultan's palace was supposed to be a place of rest, But, as you step out into the bustling morning air of Cairo, you realize you have accidentally unleashed an economic hurricane. You are Mansa Musa, and you have a bit of a spending problem though. To be fair, when you have more gold than some continents, every purchase feels like pocket change. It is a widely accepted historical fact that during your stay in Cairo, the sheer volume of gold you and your followers spent or gave away as gifts caused the value of the metal to plummet across the entire Mediterranean. For the next 12 years, the Egyptian economy would struggle with inflation because you decided to go on the world's most extravagant shopping spree. You didn't mean to break the gold market. You were just being a generous guest. But it turns out that generosity at your scale is a bit like dropping a boulder into a very small, very expensive pond. You stroll through the Khan El Khalili market, and the atmosphere is electric. Every time one of your servants opens a leather pouch to pay for a souvenir, a small crowd gathers to watch the golden dust glitter in the sun. You find a certain dry humor in the way the local merchants have suddenly become your best friends. One man tries to convince you that a slightly chipped ceramic vase is actually a sacred relic from a lost civilization, and it can be yours for only a handful of gold. You know he's stretching the truth, but you pay him anyway, mostly because his sales pitch involved a very impressive 3-minute poem about your eyebrows. You realize that in Cairo, your wealth is a magnet for the city's most creative storytellers. You are essentially a walking, breathing stimulus package, and the locals are determined to make sure not a single ounce of your gold leaves the city limits if they can help it. A quirky detail of this economic chaos is the sudden gold rush occurring in the back alleys. Because you've been so liberal with your tips, the value of gold has dropped so low that people are starting to use it for things that would have been unthinkable a week ago. You see a street performer juggling golden nuggets as if they were common pebbles, and a blacksmith using a small bar of Malian gold to prop up an uneven workbench. It's a bizarre, upside-down world where the most precious substance on earth has become as common as salt. You notice your own treasurer looking increasingly pale as he watches the market prices fluctuate. He's currently clutching a scroll of accounts like a life raft, while you are busy admiring a very fluffy Egyptian cat that you've just rented for the afternoon for a price that could have bought a small house. The air in the market is a dizzying mix of smells: charcoal-grilled lamb, sweet hibiscus tea, and the sharp, metallic temps of the coppersmith's hammers. You find a quiet corner at a shaded cafe and sit on a low stool, watching the madness unfold. Interestingly, historians still wonder if you realized the long-term damage you were doing to the Egyptian economy, or if you were simply operating under a completely different Malian economic theory. In Niani, gold is a gift from the earth to be shared. The idea that having too much of it could be a bad thing is a concept that feels as alien to you as a snowstorm. You look at your cup of dark, thick coffee, a luxury you've quickly grown fond of, and wonder if you should pay for it with gold, or if the waiter would prefer something truly valuable now, like a nice, sturdy pair of leather boots. You watch as a group of your soldiers tries to navigate a narrow alleyway, while carrying several large, ornate brass lamps they've just purchased. They look like they're having the time of their lives, their pockets literally sagging under the weight of their remaining gold. You realize that for your people, this isn't just a pilgrimage, it's a victory lap. They've survived the Sahara, and now they are enjoying the fruits of their labor in the most sophisticated city in the world. You see a soldier trade a small gold bar for a plate of kushari, a humble mix of lentils and rice, and the look of pure joy on his face makes you think that maybe the market value of gold doesn't matter as much as the value of a full stomach and a good story. The humor of your situation reaches a peak when you are invited to a formal dinner with the Sultan's elite guards. They are all wearing polished steel and fine silks, trying to look very serious and intimidating. However, the conversation keeps veering back to how much more of that yellow stuff you have back at the camp. You give them a vague, regal wave of the hand, implying that there's plenty more where that came from. You find it amusing that even the most hardened warriors become as giddy as schoolchildren when gold is involved. It's the ultimate icebreaker. You decide to gift each of them a small pouch of gold dust as a thank you for the dinner, and you watch as their professional stoicism dissolves into a series of very deep, very appreciative bows. As the sun begins to set over the Nile, the city turns a deep, dusty rose color. The chaos of the market slows down, but the Mansa Musa effect is still in full swing. You walk back toward your quarters, stepping over a discarded piece of gold thread that someone didn't even bother to pick up. It's a surreal feeling to be so wealthy that you've made wealth itself feel ordinary. You feel a sense of quiet irony. You came here to fulfill a spiritual duty, but you'll be remembered for your spending habits. You realize that you've left a permanent mark on Cairo, not through conquest or monuments, but through the simple, overwhelming power of your stroll. You lay down on your bed, the soft Egyptian linens feeling like a cool cloud against your skin. Outside, you can hear the distant shouting of a merchant who is still trying to sell a golden rug to a very tired Malian herald. You close your eyes, the rhythmic sound of the city's commerce blending into a steady, hypnotic hum. You aren't worried about the inflation or the plummeting gold prices tonight. You're just a traveler who has seen the world and found that, in the end, everything has a price. It's just that yours happens to be a little higher than most. You drift off to sleep, dreaming of golden rain falling over the minarets of Cairo, a soft and shimmering conclusion to a very expensive day. The golden chaos of Cairo is now a shimmering haze in your memory, replaced by the deep, resonant thrum of a more spiritual destination. You have finally reached the climax of your 4,000-mile stroll, the sacred city of Mecca. The transition from the loud commercial energy of the Egyptian markets to the profound, heavy silence of the Hejaz Mountains is like moving from a crowded festival into a cool, light-filled cathedral. The air here feels different. It is thin, sharp, and carries the scent of dry stone and ancient prayers. You are no longer the golden king who breaks economies. You have shed your indigo silks and your gold-threaded turbans for the Aremta simple, unadorned pieces of white cloth. In this moment, you are indistinguishable from the thousands of other pilgrims around you, a thought that brings you a sense of lightness that all the gold in Mali could never buy. It is a widely accepted historical fact that Mansa Musa's Hajj was not just a display of wealth, but a deeply felt religious journey that solidified Mali's place in the global Islamic world. As you approach the Masjid al-Haram, the sheer scale of the gathering takes your breath away. People from every corner of the known world, from the Spice Islands of the east to the rugged coasts of the west, are moving together in a slow, rhythmic tide. You find yourself standing before the Kaaba, the dark, draped heart of the city. The sun is high, and the white marble of the courtyard is so bright it seems to glow from within. Yet it remains remarkably cool beneath your bare feet. You realize that for all your power back home, you are currently just a single drop in a vast, holy ocean. You begin the tawaf, the sevenfold circumambulation of the Kaaba, and the movement is hypnotic. There is no pushing or shoving. It is a slow, swirling dance of humanity. You find a certain dry humor in the fact that your 500 heralds are currently somewhere in this crowd, probably feeling very vulnerable without their golden staves to lean on. You see a high-ranking Malian general walking beside a humble goat herder from the Atlas Mountains, their shoulders brushing in the heat. It's a beautiful, quiet irony. You spent an entire year making sure everyone knew exactly how important you were, only to reach your destination and realize the point was to forget yourself entirely. You notice a man accidentally step on the hem of your white cloth. He offers a quick, apologetic smile, having no idea he just tripped the wealthiest man in human history. You smile back, genuinely enjoying the anonymity. A quirky detail of your time in the holy cities is your sudden interest in real estate and scholarship. While the rest of the world is focused on your gold, you are focused on the brain gain. You spend your afternoons in the shade of the mosque's porticos, talking to scholars, poets, and architects. You find yourself particularly fascinated by a man named Abu Ishaq al-Sahili, a poet and architect from Granada who has a way of describing buildings as if they were living things. You realize that while you brought gold to the East, you want to bring the East's wisdom back to the West. You decide right then and there to recruit him for your return journey. It's a bit like a modern tech CEO headhunting a top engineer at a conference, except the conference is a pilgrimage and the signing bonus is an actual mountain of gold. The air in the evening is cool and carries the melodic, overlapping echoes of different languages, all reciting the same prayers. Interestingly, historians still wonder about the exact nature of your pious donations during this time. Some accounts suggest you gave so much gold to the poor of Mecca and Medina that you actually ran out of money for your return trip and had to borrow funds at a high interest rate from Egyptian merchants. Others argue this was a clever diplomatic move to ensure future credit and trade ties. You look at your empty hands and feel a strange sense of satisfaction. In Mali, the earth gives you gold every time it rains. Here, you are investing in something that doesn't tarnish. You find it amusing to think of yourself as a broke billionaire, a king who gave away a fortune just to feel the weight of a simple prayer. You spend a night in the valley of Mina, sleeping in a simple tent under a sky so clear the stars look like they're within arm's reach. The heat of the day has retreated, leaving behind a crisp, meditative chill. You listen to the soft, rhythmic chanting of the pilgrims in the neighboring tents, a low, vibrating hum that reminds you of the bees in the palace gardens of Niani. There is no talk of gold prices or palace intrigue here. The conversation is about the soul, the journey, and the long walk home. You feel a deep, soul-level exhaustion, but it's the good kind, the kind that comes after you've finally finished a task you were born to do. You've carried the hopes of your people across a desert, and you've stood where you were meant to stand. You watch a small oil lamp flicker in the corner of your tent, its golden flame dancing against the white fabric. It's a reminder of the stroll that brought you here. You think about the 80 camels, the salt city of Tagaza, and the green shade of the oases. They all feel like chapters in a book you've almost finished reading. You realize that your return journey won't be about the gold you carry, but the ideas you've gathered. You're already imagining how the Granada architect will transform the skyline of Timbuktu. You aren't just a king anymore. You're a bridge between two worlds. As the pre-dawn call to prayer rises over the valley, you feel a profound sense of peace. The sacred silence of the Hajj has done what the starlit silence of the Sahara couldn't. It has quieted the noise in your own head. You realize that the most important part of your stroll wasn't the distance you covered, but the perspective you gained. You are Mansa Musa, and you are currently the most powerful man in the world. Not because of what you own, but because of what you are willing to leave behind in the sand. You close your eyes for a final hour of sleep before the morning rituals begin. The sound of the desert wind against the tent is a soft, rhythmic lullaby that promises a safe journey home. You aren't dreaming of gold tonight. You're dreaming of mud brick mosques and the cool, flowing waters of the Niger River. You drift off, a simple man in a white cloth, tucked into the heart of a story that will be told for 1,000 years. Listening to the quiet, steady heartbeat of a world at prayer. The heavy, spiritual stillness of the holy cities begins to lift as the massive machinery of your caravan prepares to face the horizon once more. You are homeward bound, but the return journey feels fundamentally different from the departure. You aren't just carrying gold anymore. In fact, your saddlebags are considerably lighter, but your passenger list has grown much more interesting. You are currently walking near the center of the line, shielded from the sun by a canopy of Egyptian linen, and beside you travels Abu Ishaq al-Sahili, the architect you convinced to join your court. He is a man of sharp angles and even sharper ideas, currently looking at the passing dunes as if he's mentally calculating how many mud bricks it would take to turn a sand pile into a palace. It is a widely accepted historical fact that Mansa Musa returned from his Hajj with a large number of Arab scholars, jurists, and architects. Most notably al-Sahili, who is credited with introducing more sophisticated building techniques to the Mali Empire. You find a certain dry humor in the way your veterans men who have survived 3 Saharan crossings look at these scholars. Your soldiers see a group of poets who don't know how to saddle a camel, while you see the blueprints for a new era. You watch al-Sahili attempt to record a thought in his journal while his camel decides to break into a sudden, jarring trot. The look of sheer, intellectual betrayal on the architect's face as his ink pot splashes onto his sleeve is a highlight of your morning. You offer him a sympathetic nod, though you're secretly thinking that a little desert character building might be good for his design aesthetic. The return trip is a masterclass in 14th century souvenir shopping. While you gave away enough gold in Cairo to make the currency look like play money, you didn't leave empty-handed. Your caravan is now a moving museum of the Mediterranean and the East. There are crates of fine manuscripts from the libraries of Cairo, rolls of Damascus silk that shimmer like liquid moonlight, and even a few exotic plants that your gardeners are frantically trying to keep alive with drops of precious water. You see a camel carrying nothing but boxes of rare spices, cloves, cardamom, and black pepper that scent the dry desert air for 50 yards in every direction. It's a quirky detail of the return journey that your caravan no longer smells of musky goats and dust. It smells like the world's most expensive kitchen. You find yourself following the pepper camel just to enjoy the aroma, which is a significant improvement over the unwashed soldier scent that dominated the first leg of the trip. The logistics of the return are, ironically, more stressful than the way out. Because you spent so much gold, you are now operating on a budget, which for you means you only have enough to buy a small country instead of a large one. Interestingly, historians still wonder about the stories of you having to borrow money from local merchants in Cairo for the return trip. Some say it was a strategic move to build credit, while others think you simply underestimated how much you'd spend on books and poets. You find the situation amusing. The richest man in history having to negotiate a loan is the kind of irony that keeps you entertained during the long, hot afternoons. You imagine the merchants' faces when they realize their interest is being paid by the guy who literally owns the mines. The air today is thick with a heat haze that turns the horizon into a shimmering, watery mirror. You find yourself talking to al-Sahili about the great mosque you want to build in Timbuktu. You describe the way the sun hits the Niger River, and he sketches patterns in the sand with a stick during your rest breaks. He wants to introduce burnt brick and flat roofs. You want to maintain the soul of Malian mud. It's a creative tension that makes the miles fly by. You realize that you aren't just a king returning to his throne. You are an importer of dreams. You're bringing the Mediterranean to the Sahel, and the Sahel will never be the same again. You notice that the gold 80 camels now carrying significantly lighter loads of manuscripts and luxury goods, seem to have a new spring in their step. Or perhaps they just know they're heading toward the green pastures of home. You see a group of your scholars debating the finer points of Maliki law with a local Tuareg guide. The guide is winning the debate simply because he knows where the next waterhole is. It's a reminder that in the desert, practical knowledge always trumps theoretical wisdom. You give the guide a silent thumbs up as you pass, enjoying the way the scholars have to tuck their scrolls away to keep up with the pace. A sense of melancholy occasionally hits you when you look back at the shrinking distance to the east. You've reached the pinnacle of your life's journey, and now you are heading back to the real world of taxes, border disputes, and court gossip. But then you look at the men walking beside you, the poets who will write the history of your reign, and the architects who will build its monuments. You realize the stroll isn't over. It's just entering its most productive phase. You aren't just going home to rest. You're going home to build. The night camps on the return journey are more intellectual than the ones on the way out. Instead of just listening to the singing sands, you now listen to the rhythmic recitation of poetry in Arabic and Monday. The campfires are surrounded by circles of men discussing philosophy, astronomy, and the best way to prevent a mud wall from eroding in the rainy season. It's a vibrant, golden age on wheels. You sit in your tent, looking at a newly acquired map of the world, and you realize that you've finally put your empire on it. Not just as a source of gold, but as a center of civilization. As you drift off to sleep, the sound of the caravan settling down is a familiar, comforting lullaby. You hear the clink of the camel bells now, a lighter, more cheerful sound, and the soft, melodic whistling of the herdsman. You feel a deep, quiet pride. You went out a wealthy king, but you are coming back a visionary leader. You close your eyes, the scent of Damascus rosewater from a nearby crate filling your tent, and you dream of the city you are about to create. The road to Mali is long, but every step is a word in a story that will never be forgotten. The Saharan winds are finally losing their bite, replaced by a soft, humid breeze that carries the unmistakable, heavy scent of a great river. You have reached the northern fringes of the Mali Empire, and as the horizon begins to turn from a sharp, sandy yellow to a dusty, promising green, you find yourself standing on a ridge overlooking Timbuktu. Beside you, Al-Sahili practically vibrates with architectural excitement. He has been staring at the city through a brass-bound spyglass for an hour, mumbling about load-bearing mud and the geometric potential of the Sahel. You find a certain dry humor in his enthusiasm. To him, Timbuktu is a blank canvas of sun-baked earth. To you, it is the crown jewel of your kingdom that just needs a little bit of a Mediterranean glow. It is a widely accepted historical fact that upon his return from Mecca, Mansa Musa transformed Timbuktu into a world-class center of learning and Islamic culture, commissioning the construction of the Great Mosque, the Kaaba. You watch as your 60,000 followers begin to spill onto the banks of the Niger River like a slow, golden tide. The sight is breathtaking. The river is a broad, shimmering ribbon of silver blue that seems to breathe with the land. You see the traditional pirogues, long, narrow boats gliding through the reeds, their rowers stopping mid-stroke to stare at the impossible spectacle of your return. You realize that while you've been gone, you've become a ghost story and a legend rolled into one. Now, you're here to prove that the legend has a very large appetite for construction. You sit in the shade of a massive baobab tree, sharing a bowl of cold millet water with Al-Sahili. He is frantically sketching on a piece of parchment, his charcoal pencil flying as he describes a mosque with a flat roof and pyramidal minarets. A radical departure from the rounded shapes of Niani. A quirky detail of these planning sessions is the mud testing ritual. Al-Sahili is obsessed with the quality of the local clay. You watch him walk down to the riverbank, dig up a handful of muck, and squeeze it between his fingers with the intensity of a diamond merchant. He even smells it. You can't help but chuckle. You've spent your life surrounded by gold, and here is the most famous architect in Granada, acting as if a specific patch of river mud is more precious than a treasury full of nuggets. He claims the plasticity of the Timbuktu soil is superior. You just think he's happy to finally be somewhere that has a consistent water supply. The air in Timbuktu is different from the thin, spiritual air of Mecca or the spicy, crowded air of Cairo. It is an academic air, the smell of old leather bindings, sun-dried ink, and the earthy aroma of the river. You see the first of your scholars already setting up temporary stalls to trade manuscripts with the local elders. Interestingly, historians still wonder if Timbuktu was already a major intellectual hub before you arrived, or if your return journey was the Big Bang that created its reputation. While the city was already a trading post, it was your vision and your very deep pockets that turned it into a magnet for the world's greatest minds. You find a bit of irony in the fact that for all the gold you carried, the most valuable things you brought back were essentially a bunch of guys who like to argue about grammar and the stars. The logistics of building a mosque in Timbuktu are as much about sociology as they are about engineering. You have to convince the local guilds that this foreign style of architecture is a good idea. You spend your afternoons in long, polite meetings where you use your diplomatic voice, the one that sounds like velvet but feels like iron. You notice that Al-Sahili has a habit of gesticulating wildly when he talks about minarets, nearly knocking over your tea on several occasions. You decide that as long as he builds something that won't melt in the first rainy season, he can move his arms as much as he likes. You realize that you aren't just building a mosque, you're building a brand for your empire. You want people in Baghdad and Cordoba to hear the word Molly and think of libraries, not just mines. As the sun begins to set over the Niger, the river turns a deep, bruised purple, and the sky becomes a canvas of orange and gold. You walk along the bank, the mud squelching satisfyingly beneath your sandals. You see a group of children playing in the shallows, oblivious to the fact that their king is standing 20 feet away. One of them finds a small, shiny pebble and shows it to his friend with a look of pure triumph. You smile, thinking about the 300-pound bags of gold dust currently being unloaded from your camels. Perspective is a funny thing. To that child, a pretty stone is a treasure. To you, gold is just the fuel that powers your dream of a university. The night in Timbuktu is alive with the sound of the river, the soft lap-lap of water against the boats, and the deep, rhythmic croaking of bullfrogs. You sit in your temporary pavilion, listening to Al-Sahili and a local Malian builder debate the best way to reinforce the Toran beams. Their voices are low and steady, a melodic backdrop to the flickering of the oil lamps. You feel a sense of immense, quiet excitement. You've crossed the world and seen its wonders, and now you're going to build a wonder of your own right here in the red earth. You find yourself staring at the moon, which is reflected perfectly in the still water of the river. You think about the stroll that started over a year ago. You've lost a lot of gold, gained a lot of grey hairs, and recruited an architect who is currently trying to convince you that limestone accents are the future. But as you listen to the sounds of the city waking up to its new destiny, you realize it was worth every grain of dust. You aren't just the man who broke the Egyptian economy. You are the man who is going to make the desert bloom with knowledge. You lay down on your bed, the familiar scent of the Sahel returning to your lungs. The stroll is almost over, but the work is just beginning. You close your eyes, the rhythmic sound of the river's flow syncing with your own steady breathing. You aren't dreaming of the Kaaba or the markets of Cairo anymore. You're dreaming of a forest of wooden beams rising out of the mud, a silhouette of a mosque against the Saharan stars. You drift off to sleep, a king who has finally found his true purpose, listening to the quiet, steady pulse of a city about to become immortal. The rhythmic thwack-thwack of wooden paddles, smoothing wet mud, becomes the soundtrack to your new life in Niani. You have finally returned to the heart of your empire. But you are no longer the same man who left. The stroll has ended, but its legacy is manifesting in the very skyline of your capital. You are standing in the shadow of your brand new audience chamber, a structure that looks like nothing West Africa has ever seen. Al-Sahili, true to his word, has replaced the traditional rounded corners with sharp, elegant lines and a towering dome that seems to challenge the very sky. It is a widely accepted historical fact that the Great Hall of Niani was a marvel of its time, featuring a sophisticated interior of colorful plaster and windows framed in gold and silver. You walk through the cool interior, and the transition from the Saharan sun to this shaded sanctuary is a physical relief. The air smells of fresh lime, cedar wood, and a faint, sweet scent of the oil used to polish the ebony doors. You notice a group of your court officials walking on eggshells. They aren't sure if they should treat you like the king they remember or the legend you've become. You find a certain dry humor in their confusion. One elderly advisor tries to bow so low that his turban nearly rolls into a bucket of plaster. You catch it with the tip of your sandal and offer him a wink. "Careful, Ibrahim," you say, "the floor is new, but the gravity is still the same." You realize that while you were busy moving mountains of gold, the world back home stayed exactly as it was: small, cozy, and desperately in need of a good story. A quirky detail of your post-pilgrimage life is your new office setup. You've traded your mobile tent for a throne room that looks like a jewel box. The windows are carved with intricate geometric patterns that filter the sunlight into 1,000 dancing diamonds on the floor. You see Al-Sahili standing in the corner, looking at a wall with a frown. You ask him what's wrong, and he complains that the local plasterers are too enthusiastic with their textures. He wanted smooth Andalusian perfection. They gave him Malian character. You look at the wallet, has a slight hand-molded ripple that catches the light beautifully, and you decide you prefer the character. It's a reminder that you can bring the Mediterranean to the Sahel, but the Sahel will always have the final say. The humor of your return reaches its peak when you realize that your gold 80 camels have become local celebrities. They are currently grazing in a special royal pasture, and people come from miles away just to look at the animals that carried a mountain. You hear a rumor that a local merchant is trying to sell authentic Saharan sand that was allegedly stuck to one of the camel's hooves. You find it hilarious. You've spent a year trying to get the sand out of your clothes, and here people are paying for it. Interestingly, historians still wonder about the long-term impact of your return on Malian society. While the gold was gone, you replaced it with the University of Sanka in Timbuktu, which would eventually house one of the largest libraries in the world. You've effectively traded a finite resource for an infinite one. You look at the scholars walking through your courtyard, men you brought back from Cairo and Meccarand. You realize that these books on legs are the true wealth of your reign. The air in Niani is heavy with the coming rains, a humid, earthy pressure that promises life. You stand on your balcony, looking out over the city. The mud brick houses are glowing in the pre-storm light, and the Niger River in the distance is a dark, churning line. You feel a profound sense of closure. The journey was 4,000 miles of dust, heat, salt, and gold. But it led you right back to where you started. Only now, you can see the potential in the mud. You aren't just a king who owns a gold mine. You're the architect of a golden age. You watch as the first heavy drops of rain hit the new dome of your hall. The mud darkens, and the smell of wet earth rises to meet you. It's a scent that means home. You think about the singing sands, the salt city of Tagaza, and the white marble of Mecca. They are all part of you now, a map etched into your memory that no wind can erase. You realize that the stroll wasn't about the destination or the gold. It was about the transformation. You went out as a ruler and came back as a bridge. As the sun sets, casting a long, violet shadow across the palace, you feel the day's heat finally break. You walk back inside, your footsteps echoing on the polished stone. The silence of the palace is different. Now it's a full silence, pregnant with the ideas and stories you brought home. You lay down on your bed, listening to the rhythmic drumming of the rain against the walls. It's a steady, peaceful beat that matches the rhythm of your own heart. The stroll is finally over. You are Mansa Musa, the King of Kings, and you are home. You close your eyes, the scent of the rain-washed earth filling your room, and you drift off to sleep. You aren't dreaming of the horizon tonight. You're dreaming of the legacy you've built, a story made of gold and mud that will shine long after the dunes have moved on. Would you like me to tell you more about the specific architectural wonders Al-Sahili built, or perhaps the daily life of a scholar at the University of